Today we're going to go through the procedure for rebuilding a Uni-Roller pump on a Unist Uni-Roller. This is a 6-inch Uni-Roller with one pump installed on it. If your system has more than one pump, you use the same procedure as what we'll see here today. The tools that we recommend you gather before you start the rebuild process are a pair of standard pliers, a small flat screwdriver, a 9/32 Allen wrench, a 7/64 Allen wrench, and a pump overhaul kit. I'll open the pump overhaul kit and we'll look at the parts that are inside of here. Set of instructions here first that you can follow along with. We also have a piston assembly with quad rings installed on it. There's also a little bit of grease on those quad rings. If it doesn't feel like there's much grease, you can add a little bit more to it. We've got a piston guide with an O-ring installed on it. Again, there's a little bit of grease already installed on the O-rings. If you need a little bit more, just use some O-ring grease. We've got a return spring. We have the pump knob spring. We have a retaining ring. An E-clip. There are 4 duckbill check valves and 1 nylon tip. The first step to rebuilding the pump is to remove the pump from the Uni-Roller. If we rotate this around so you can see it. First step is to remove the red tubes from the pump. And then use the 9/32 Allen wrench to loosen the pump mounting screws. Once the mounting screws are loose, you can pull the whole pump off. Keep the mounting screws for when you have to reinstall this on the roller again. First step is to remove the top block. Use the 7/64 Allen wrench to loosen these 2 socket head cap screws that hold the top block in place. Once those are loose, you can lift the top block off. You'll see that's where the 2 check valves are in the top block and the other 2 check valves are in the pump body. You can go ahead and just pull those out. New check valves are included in the overhaul kit, so you can get rid of these old ones. Sometimes you need a small screwdriver to kind of peel these out of here. Once the check valves are out, you can put the top block aside, and we'll focus now on rebuilding the actual guts of the pump body. Use the small screwdriver to push the E-clip off. Once the E-clip is off, you can use your pliers to grab the nylon tip on the other end and pull that off. You can also remove the pump adjustment knob. There's a spring located under this, so you can remove that also. That can stay in there for now. And then on this end of the pump, there's a retaining ring, which is what we need to remove next. On one end of the retaining ring, there's a small tab that you can fit your small screwdriver behind. And you have to fit it behind there and then pry it out. Once you have the retaining ring pulled up a little bit, you can keep your screwdriver under it and just rotate around till that retaining ring comes out. Once the retaining ring is out, you can put the pump on end and push down, and that will start the removal of the piston guide and the piston assembly. To pull it out the rest of the way, use your pliers to wiggle that free. And the pump guide, piston assembly, and return spring should all come out together. And then you're left with an empty pump body housing. Now that we've got everything removed from the old pump body, we can start using some of the new parts and put the pump back together. First step is to put the pump adjustment knob back onto the pump body. You notice I don't have the spring in here right now. It's not needed right now. We'll put that in later. But we'll put the pump adjustment knob on, and you can thread that on all the way to the pump body. Then you can put the the pump body on end, drop in the return spring, and then drop in the piston with the quad rings already installed inside of that return spring. Then you can grab the tip of this piston with pliers and rotate this around, and then you can use the pliers to wiggle the piston assembly back and forth. And you want to be careful as you're moving those quad rings into the bore of the pump body that you don't slice the quad ring. So you want to use a real gentle twisting motion to get the quad ring past any corners inside the pump body. Once the end of the piston is protruding through the knob, you can use the E-clip and put that in the groove. And once that E-clip is in place, you can let go, and that E-clip will hold that piston assembly in place. Next step is to put your piston guide in. Same caution goes here about slicing the quad rings and slicing the O-rings. You want to push it in, but also gently twist it so that we don't slice that O-ring as we're inserting it. Once you get the O-ring in there part way, you can actually use your small screwdriver to push it in to expose that retaining ring groove that's on the inside of that pump body wall. Once your guide is pushed all the way down, you can install the new retaining ring. It's easiest to insert one end down into the groove and then hold the other end up and use your small screwdriver and work your way all the way around the circumference of that retaining ring until it snaps into place. Next, you take the nylon tip, and you can actually use, we just use pliers to kind of tap that in place. You can tap it on all the way with the pliers. If you'd prefer to use a hammer, you can use that also. After the nylon tip is installed, you can then remove the E-clip again and take that adjustment knob off. We then need to put the new duckbill check valves in to the pump body and also into the top block. And then we want to mount the top block to the pump body again. Make sure the top block is positioned so that the check valves on the pump body line up with the holes in the top block. Once they're correctly positioned, you can then tighten up the top block screws again. And now you should be able to grab the piston assembly and it should extend and retract pretty easily. Before we put the pump adjustment knob on and mount the pump back onto the Uni-Roller, we're going to quick test it to make sure that it works. So I've got just a cup of water here. You can test the pump with your lubricant if you prefer. And then I've got a couple pieces of tubing that I'm going to use to kind of draw the water up and my little test setup here. So I'll put the 1/4-inch tube into the water, and that's my suction line. So as I pump, you should see the water or the lubricant coming up into the pump body. And as I continue to fill the inside of the pump, you'll start to see fluid coming out of the discharge lines. So I should have pumping action in both the extend, when I extend the piston, and also when the piston retracts. And I can see that I've got that happening here. And we can also look while we're pumping, we can look at the end of the piston to verify that we don't see any leakage out of here and that we didn't slice one of those quad rings on the piston. And we can also look at the other side and make sure we don't see any leakage around the guide or between the guide and the piston assembly on this end also. Once we've cycled it a couple times and verify that there's no fluid leaking out of there, we can take our suction line off, cycle the pump a few more times to get all the, in this case, get all the water out, in your case, get all the lubricant out, and then you can remove these test lines. Now that we know the pump is rebuilt and working properly, we can put our pump adjustment knob back on. We first have to drop the spring inside the knob, and then we can thread that on to the pump body. We can thread it on almost all the way. And then you can push the piston out to expose that groove that the E-clip goes into and snap the E-clip in place. Once the adjustment knob is on, you can put your mounting screws back in place and then go back to mounting the pump onto the Uni-Roller assembly. Once the pump is mounted back onto the Uni-Roller, you just need to reinstall the tubes. So make sure that the upper tube goes to the upper port and that the lower tube goes to the lower port. And you can just verify that everything is still rotates and the pump can reach full stroke without any binding issues.